too many years, the animating principle of what's happened is that with great income inequality, what's happened is the charlatans have been able to pit black folks against white folks, against Latino, etc. And because if you have a problem, it's the other.
We have a fundamental issue, and that is, who is our government going to work for? Is it going to just keep working for the rich and the powerful, keep working for a thinner and thinner slice at the top, or are we going to have a government that works for everyone else?
Welcome back. Former Vice President Joe Biden and Senator Elizabeth Warren were among the roster of Democratic candidates speaking at a forum today, highlighting issues facing lower-income Americans. Their dueling appearances come as new polling shows Warren's economic message is resonating with voters. In the latest NBC News Wall Street Journal poll, 26% of Democratic primary voters say they're enthusiastic about her candidacy. That's a 6-point bump from last month, while that number dips for both Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders. It might explain why Biden's team is also reportedly getting a little worried about her rise. And President Trump's campaign is zeroing in on the threat that she could pose. Emily Bazelon is a staff writer for The New York Times. She just profiled Senator Warren for the latest issue of The New York Times Magazine. It's a great read. And here on set, NBC News correspondent Mike Memoli, who has been covering the Biden campaign. It's great to have both of you on board. Emily, let me start with you because you spent a bunch of time with Senator Warren at her home, interviewing her, talking through kind of the challenges that she uniquely faces, but also helping to explain why it is that suddenly she does seem to be gaining traction. Knowing what you know, what do you attribute this rise to for Warren?
It's a great question. I think she's been very much getting her message out about her ideas, rolling out different plans. I have a plan for that has become a T-shirt in the time that I was talking to Senator Warren. And I think for Democratic voters, there's this sense, okay, here is someone who wants big change in Washington and who really has thought through how she wants to do that.
Mike, how worried is the Biden campaign about what's going on?
Well, I think obviously they felt like the rollout went well. The polls reflected a pretty strong position. And now they're at the point where they're pretty much all focused about the debate. Now, Biden's not going to be on the same stage as Elizabeth Warren, which could actually help them or hurt them. I think they're a little bit uneasy with just how many other A-listers are sort of side by side with him. But with Warren and Biden, it's always been, we talk about Democrats choosing between their head and their heart. And Biden's argument has very much been about electability. And the concern, I think, that Warren faced very early on was that she was rightly or wrongly pigeonholed as Pocahontas. And what we're potentially seeing now is Democratic voters really warming again, their hearts now taking over just a little bit. And Biden has not yet made that argument beyond I can beat Trump. And so they're going to we saw that today he hinted a little bit more about his health care policy. He's been trying to do other policy rollouts. That's something that they know they need to do more of to sort of keep his position strong.
Yeah. Emily, what did you learn from talking to Elizabeth Warren about how they're thinking about the trajectory and how it relates to electability vis-a-vis this president? I mean, I think that there was a real sense initially when she sort of botched the DNA test, and of course the president was attacking her, and he even at one point basically said, perhaps I've already beaten Elizabeth Warren. Like, whoops, I'm obviously not going to be facing her. But she does seem to be coming back against that. I mean, how worried are they that that's going to all come back if the president starts attacking them again?
They are hoping that she's left that behind her. They came from behind when she ran for the Senate against Republican Scott Brown in 2012, and they feel like they have a kind of similar possible upswing here. Voters in the Democratic Party, as you've been saying, are very focused on electability. But when you look at recent choices they've made, in particular the decision to stick with Hillary Clinton in 2016, that didn't work out in terms of electability. And so I think one of the arguments the Warren people can make is, look, go with your heart.
Yeah, I think that, Mike, you were making a similar point. And, this polling, I mean, we've seen it obviously in the new national NBC numbers, but it's also shown up in South Carolina. And obviously, South Carolina polls are subject to what happens in Iowa and New Hampshire. That's so right. let's not pretend that's not the case. But it's still interesting to me that Biden is down 9 and Elizabeth Warren is up 9. Kamala Harris has probably very concerningly fallen back a percentage point in this poll. But that Warren number is really interesting, especially considering how heavily African-American the South Carolina electorate is.
We've seen a lot that the enthusiasm numbers are starting to diminish for a little bit for Joe Biden. And he hasn't really been to South Carolina that much. He's going to be there this weekend along with 21 other Democrats at the Clyburn Fish Fry. But yeah, I think there's a recognition that he needs to do more. What's interesting about the vice president's team is really focusing on this debate at the moment. They know that this is a moment where, folks gave him a good look, in the rollout. He largely passed the test, but his performance is going to be so critical. He's spending a lot of time reading memos, doing briefings with his staff. We saw him today for the first time speaking with a time limit at that poverty forum.
Is that what was going on? I kind of wondered.
He had 4 minutes to race through a little bit of a stump speech. It didn't go well, but that very much we're at the point where performance is going to be critical and in sustaining the enthusiasm that he did see early on.
Yeah, and Emily, are the Warren folks nervous that she's on stage essentially by herself as the front runner in on her group that evening? Matt Visor, who's a reporter who's covered her for most of her career, was making the point the other day that she often benefits from being the underdog, and she's not going to be the underdog on that stage.
Yes, it does sort of set her up as being the person who could lose that debate. And when you're on a stage with 9 other people, you never know what can happen. So I think objectively it would probably be better for her to be on that stage on the second day with the other front runners. But on the other hand, they have the chance to get more attention. It's possible more people will tune in the first night just because it's the first debate. And she'll just stick to her case. There are so many debates to come, so long to go in this race. I think this is just one small stop along the way.
I almost want to say, don't remind me. Mike, you mentioned healthcare and putting meat on the bone for a plan. And Biden did a little bit of this today in the speech. We have this soundbite where Biden sort of comes out a little bit unexpectedly and says he supports a public option. Watch.
I think everyone's entitled to have total health care. And what I would do is make sure that every single person, as I propose, every single person in the United States has access to Medicaid right off the bat.
So, Mike, you guys followed up with the Biden campaign and are now reporting that he is essentially supporting a public option. Where is that kind of coming from? Is this, they clearly are under pressure to say what he's for on this with everyone else on the Medicare for All bandwagon. Well,
this is classic Joe Biden. He's revealing publicly what they're talking about privately, and that's one of the reasons it's always been so fun to cover his campaign. What he talked about early on in the rollout, well, obviously there was a lot of questions about Medicare for All. Is he going to sign on to that litmus test issue? He did talk about allowing people to buy into a Medicare-like plan. What was new today is focus very much on red states with Republican governors, states where they did not expand Medicaid, which was originally an important part of the Affordable Care Act that was supposed to be nationwide, and ended up with sort of a bifurcated medical system in this country. And so that's what he's talking about, is premium-free Medicaid option for people in those states that do not have a Medicaid expansion. It's interesting that, he talked about this in the context of poverty today. He talked about when he announced he was reversing himself on the Hyde Amendment, he also said that was a decision he came to as part of this reconsideration of his own health care plan. So he's sort of making his new health care policy on the fly a little bit, it seems like publicly, but this is very much part of the process that's happening behind the scenes.
Do we think he's going to do this at the debate, too?
Well, that's part of why they're doing this policy, because they want to be able to have the answers when these questions come to him. He was going to be asked, let's face it, about Medicare for All. Why not sign on to that? So that's why they're trying to line up the pieces ahead of time to know where he stands.
Man, this is going to be an interesting week or so for the Biden campaign. Emily Bazelon, great reporting. I highly recommend reading the piece in full. It's great. Mike Memoli, thanks to you as well for your great reporting on the Biden campaign.
Hello, YouTubers. If you're watching this, it means you've checked out our channel, so thank you. Now do me a favor, subscribe by clicking on that button down there. Click on any of the videos to watch the latest interviews and highlights from MTP Daily and MSNBC. You can get more Meet the Press content every morning in the First Read newsletter. If you're tired of content that you don't know anything about where it came from, you don't have to have that problem with us. NBC News, MSNBC, MTP, and the Meet the Press mindset right here for you on YouTube. Subscribe now.